everyone's dealing with having to cope pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Come on.
You know, one of the ways that I cope is I put myself deep into work.
'Cause I remember there was a time in my life where I was coping the wrong way. I was doing drugs, I was smoking weed or whatever it was, just to cope, you know what I'm saying?
Coping
So
becomes
real.
this mountain of trying to do something until we become centralized.
This is Choice, the latest ministry coming out of the Joshua's Tree Ministry umbrella that talks about every aspect of life, but from the perspective of God. And for this conversation, we flew all the way from San Diego, California to Hartford, Connecticut, where we talked about something that affects every man, whether he knows it or not: coping. Think about it. Life throws a lot our way, and sometimes we turn to certain habits or routines just to get by. But when do these habits become something deeper? Maybe even a way of hiding pain. In this episode, Apostle Angela Harris, along with the JTM team and our special guest Ryan, digs into what coping really looks like for men and why recognizing it can change everything. This conversation is all about getting real, uncovering the truth, and learning how to move forward through faith and community. Now let's get started.
So this is Joshua's Tree Ministry. We are actually building up another ministry under the umbrella of Joshua's Tree Ministry, and that ministry is called Choice. And so therefore we're happy to announce that. And we are really excited about what God is going to be doing with us with this ministry. It is a choice on every level to serve God and to do every way that you feel that you need to serve God. So we really honor the word choice. We know how desperate we can become, but we know how God is calling us and what he wants from us. So it is all of our choice that we do what we do, right? So this is why we're talking about this podcast today under the umbrella of Joshua's Tree Ministries by the way of choice. So today we're going to be talking about cope. What it means to cope. C-O-P-E. How do we cope? What do we cope with? Why we need to cope? Do we want to cope? If we don't want to cope, how we need to sacrifice to cope, and things like that. And so, you know, I have Jaquan here, I have Lance here, I have Ryan, I have Jaden here, and we are all part of this actual podcast that's going to be able to talk to people. So how you guys feeling?
Feel good.
You guys feeling good?
Yeah.
Trying to cope.
Try to cope, right?
Yeah,
I hear you. So let me ask this question. So you guys, what do you feel about cope? What do you know about it? Anybody could kind of talk about what you know about cope.
Just trying to, like, for me, like, coping means to me, like, trying to get through something, through a situation, right? And it could be a coping, it could be, like, trying to get through something that's good, you know, or most of the time, you know, it might be something that's bad, trying to get through it, trying to figure out a way through. Like, for me, it's hard to cope, right? For me, it's more of, like, I understand that it has to happen, right? I understand that I have to figure out a way, whatever I'm feeling in that moment, figure out how to feel better about the situation. But sometimes it's a delayed thing, right? Sometimes I don't have time to really cope in that moment with it. You know what I'm saying? 100%. So sometimes it's like I might end up, when I finally be able to really cope, I don't even recognize that I'm coping.
Come on.
Right? Because I forgot about what I even went through. I just had to push through that moment. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So coping for me is kind of hard, right? Because it comes on at random times. Like, and then sometimes I don't even recognize that there is something to cope over. You know what I'm saying?
That's powerful right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm telling you, that is good, right? It's really big, because I feel like too that people don't realize that they need to cope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Especially men.
Yeah.
Men,
exactly.
You know, it's like always, for me, it's almost a pressure. Like, even though you're going through this or this is happening, you got to get through it, because, like, at the end of the day, we're men. You know what I'm saying? And there's that thing, men don't cry, or, you know, you got to be strong and tough. But I think that is also I'm getting into a place of understanding that, it's okay to cry, right? And then also
That's good.
men, we don't have to be tough all the time. You know what I'm saying? It's good to have a balance to understand that, all right, you know, I need to be soft right now so I can get through this, right? Or even understanding that there is something to get through, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And I feel like going on what you said about like being soft, I feel like that's something that really comes with manhood. I feel like once you unlearn the situations that you need to be soft, especially like for your family and stuff like that, I feel like that's when you enter a real place of manhood. And I also feel like that's a level of strength, being able to be like, you know what, I'm gonna be vulnerable right now. I'm gonna, you know, open up with my kids, open up with my family. I'm not gonna have on this mean face all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a level of strength that takes a lot of self mastery to do. You know.
Yeah. I agree with you guys, and so Lance, something that you were saying, I mean, especially about the fact of you don't, depending on what you're doing, you don't even realize you have to cope, right? I just wanted to kind of bring into the fact of like that is very, very true, but that's what gets people in a whole bunch of trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we're too busy in life to realize certain things. I like to even say that it's breathing in and out. We don't, you know what I mean? And especially with men, but not only with men. I mean, I'm a woman, and I'm a woman of 4 sons, you know, raising you guys up, and it was tough trying to take a moment to say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did I drink some water even? You know, am I coping with life? And that brought me into a whole mechanism of, dang. And then, you know, a lot of times we talking about we be needing vacations and stuff. We really don't need a vacation. Come on. What Ryan here? Just cope.
I was gonna say that like everyone's dealing with having to cope pretty much every day.
Come on.
Like when you talk to somebody or whatever, they want to go home, they want to unwind after work. That's coping. You know, like when it comes to like we sell it in America, like when it comes to like happy hour, we got happy hour. That's all coping. That's all people having to work. And be like, oh, well, let me go off of work and have a drink or whatever. And everyone's trying to cope with something, whether it's a difficult day at job or office, whatever it is, like whatever you're trying to build, whatever you're trying to do, it comes with like, you know, you hurdles, and you're always going to be feeling as if there's something that you need to do to be able to find yourself back from everything you were doing.
Yeah.
And it's so real that you're saying that, because I remember there was a time in my life where I was coping the wrong way, and I was doing drugs, I was smoking weed or whatever it was just to cope, you know what I'm saying? But now it's like, well, thank God, he helped me to like really cleanse from doing all the other ways I thought about coping, but he showed me that there's a new way of coping, you know. It's just you know, really leaning in on him.
Yeah,
you know?
and cope through him.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I don't have to do that.
Right. And I think like for me, my coping mechanism is like I push, you know, one of the ways that I cope is I put myself deep into work, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, but now I understand, like, all right, Lance, if you're like staying up at night worrying about emails while you're at home and answering, doing all this other stuff, like, all right, come on,
right?
You know,
something going on.
And it was weird. It's kind of weird because it's like I'm coping from all the stress I'm doing at work, just to go deeper into work. You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy.
But it's also like a barrier for me, right? Because I feel like if I don't cope through work, then I'll cope through drinking.
Yeah.
You know, I'll cope through smoking or womanizing or different things like that. So it's like really for me, you know, God is trying to take me and like Lance, like I told Jay Quan, like cope through me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know, because if I don't, then I'm just using out of those vices that I have, just thinking that work is, oh, that's the safest one. You know what I'm saying? But then I'm not realizing that who I'm affecting by not coping through him. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love is just as similar to what Ryan was saying, even about how we go and we decide that we want to drink. Or so I love what he said. It's like society set this up for us to be able to cope in these ways that are, you know, they're never going to help us. These coping factors are never going to help us, but we run to them, right? And I feel like even the fact of coping, when I think about the C in cope, I think about centralization.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think about, you know what I'm saying?
That's tough right
That's
there.
tough.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying?
Explain more.
Yeah. You know, no, so it's about how we centralize ourselves every single day.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And even every moment of the day. Because what happens is that we really are not going anywhere until we do centralize, right?
Yeah.
So we have to kind of think about ourselves in a way where we want to figure out where we are right now. That's the hardest part for us. And I think that when we don't cope, right, I'm trying to think of a word where it throws you all the way out. It just makes you like,
Yeah.
you know, it really does nothing for you, but you think that it is, right? Because you're finding a mechanism. You talked about working, going into work, and actually, but you, like you just said, it doesn't really work. Work doesn't even work. Doesn't even work because of what happens when you are not taking that centralization moment to say, where am I right now?
Right.
Right? This is not about, because what's coming to my mind too is about how we think about who needs to help us. I was even listening to what you was just saying when you talked about how we go to these bars. We think this bar is going to help us.
Right.
You know, some people do it through porn. Some people do it through masturbation. Some people do it through their kids. They try to cope by going through their kids. They try to cope but what we're doing is making things a bigger mess. And then we got to figure out how to cope again with that, right? Coping becomes this. It becomes a mountain of trying to do something until we become centralized.
Something that you said earlier, you know, that really resonated with me is like you talked about, you know, being a parent and trying to cope.
Yeah.
Right. And that is something that, you know, is close to me because it's like, you know, I have kids and it's like trying to get them to where they need to be or trying to, again, work so that, you know, later on, you know, my thought process is like later on I don't have to worry about it or worry about them because they have what they needed. Yeah, they have what they need, right? But then also is a point that I'm not even coping with having to do all this for them so that I can actually be there for them.
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And so it's like counterproductive. You know,
that's what it is. Counterproductive.
Yeah, and it's amazing. You know, to be honest with you, before this conversation, I never really thought about really coping because what it is you just get through it. You know what I'm saying? You move, you continue to move. Right.
One thing I want to ask you, because you spoke on like you tried to cope with work, and you kind of came to the realization that you didn't even know you needed to cope, and you didn't know what you were doing was trying to cope. And a lot of times you said that people go to bars, they go do this and that, trying to fill a void. And I feel like one of the things that people do try to cope from is the fact that they're trying to cope from things that they know doesn't work.
Yeah.
So deep down within, they know they're doing something that doesn't help them, but they don't want to really face what the problem is, and that fact alone, they're trying to cope from that as well. And we spoke on like going to God and allowing God to do certain things, and it's kind of like when life cuts you and you have an open wound and you got to pour alcohol on it, and you know the alcohol is going to sterilize it and make it clean, but it's going to burn in the process. And a lot of people are scared of dealing with that burn, and that's how they think of God. That's how they look at God. If I go to God, then he might, you know, open up. I'm gonna have to look at the fact that this happened to me when I was 6, and this happened to me when I was 7, and I think this way, and I'm insecure because I think this way, or I don't respect this part of myself, and I have to look in the mirror. So what would you say to that person or those people who know deep down within that what they're doing doesn't work, but they're struggling to do what they know does work because they've been going through so much their whole life that facing it is kind of like another battle for them or another wound for them, they feel like.
I feel like, again, I mean, I didn't know it either when I was talking about this this topic of coping, And as I was speaking, the Lord said centralization. Again, that's what I would tell people, right? You got to centralize. Well, people don't want to centralize, right? Because again, it makes them have to face something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes them have to face stuff.
Yeah.
People do not like to have to face something. And so because they don't want to have to face it, they keep running into cavities that they think that they're filling, but it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So basically until, so when you speaking, I'm thinking about a person who knows that it's not working, all right? I feel like people that know that it's not working basically are in the back of their mind is believing somehow that it is going to work. It still becomes that oxymoron, right? Because
they teeter with that.
Yeah, they teeter with it because they feel to themselves, this is all that I have.
Yeah, this is all I got.
You know, this is all I got. And I think that even people of our culture, you mentioned not wanting, didn't know that we run trying to fix it all. Yeah, we figured that we can fix it all. And so we do not want to cope. And centralization is not even in our vocabulary.
So what does that look like practically, centralizing? What does it look like, especially like for a man? What does it look like for a guy who's stressed out? How does he centralize?
I love that. So I think for a man, men have this outer exterior. They have this strong thing. They don't really want people to see what's inside.
Yeah.
Right? Women, we kind of just wear our whole place on our sleeves, some of us. But, our whole life on our sleeve. But men don't like to do that. No. And I think that the reason why, not so much the reason why, I think that men have to actually look at centralization. I always, not to be funny, but I always look at it, where am I going tomorrow? What am I going to do tomorrow? That's where you focus and centralize. That question of centralization, what does that look practically? Where am I going tomorrow? Period. You mentioned about how your children, looking about how your structure is, your life, your home, your family. But looking at where you want to go tomorrow is the whole capsule of being centralized.
Speak it. My bad. She was going in.
Yeah, so like, just two quick things I wanted to say, like, based off what you guys were saying, and something I just thought about. Jaden was talking about, like, basically trying to cope in a situation where, like, something that happened to you when you were 6, right? I think a big thing about coping, right, is being honest with it, right? Understanding that what you're going through today, and what happened today has nothing to do with what happened when you were 6 years old.
Come on,
right? Be honest, right? Because if you don't, then you're just trying to cope for something, or you're putting off that coping that you have to do for that situation with something that you already went through and
like
already
fighting imaginary battles.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, if we be, like you said, if you centralize yourself, right, and be honest with yourself and understand, like, it has nothing to do with I'm being 6 years old. Is that I didn't make this promotion that I wanted, right? You can really get through more of the problems, right? The second part that I wanted to speak to was, like, we have to understand that society has set it up to make us believe that 19 years old, you have to have $1 million and you have to be drawing, this different thing and everything like that.
Gosh.
And so the pressures of society, like, you have to take yourself out of Instagram, all these different social media platforms, and live in reality.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not saying that at 19, your goal for being a millionaire at 19 can't happen.
It's not real, right? But it could be.
But you have to, when you make a goal, you have to be in a level of, is it realistic, right? So that if you don't make it, you're not coping because it's like, oh, I didn't make it. It's just that you didn't set it up a correct way, or it just was not that time.
Well,
you get what I'm saying?
Well, you're absolutely correct, and so and so that shifts into a whole nother segment, right? Because then at that point we're talking about opportunity, right? We're talking about operating, right? And it all leads right back to coping and right back to centralization, right? So remember too, we're all a product.
Right.
We're a product to society. We are you are a product, you and I am too. With us being a product to society, what is it that we're going to cope with? How? If people can get you to drink, if Budweiser can get you to be their best spokesperson, you know what I mean? If they can, I just, people around me don't even drink Budweiser, I don't even know. But whatever, if lashes or gashes can make me their spokesperson, you know what I'm saying? It's all about how we look at stuff and then go right back to ourselves.
Do you all think, like, if the more and more you cope doing the wrong thing, is it harder to dig yourself out of that hole?
Absolutely.
In order to, like, pull yourself to where you're supposed to be?
100%.
It's almost, but it's not yourself, and this is why we go back to God, in which so to pull yourself out is very hard, right? But again, for God to pull it out is just as me 90, he 90, he 90.
It can be one prayer, like it can be one moment where he just breaks you down, and like everything that you've been dealing with just like is gone.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's crazy because I look at my life and I think about how the actions I took was all because of coping. I was trying to cope in every single aspect of my life.
Yeah.
Whether it was insecurity, it was I didn't feel like I had the best in me to perform. Whether it was the ability to mask myself by drinking or mask myself by smoking, I was coping because I felt like I wasn't confident enough, or I felt like I just wasn't up to par where I needed to be. So those moments made me feel like, you know what, you're better off doing this just so you don't see the reality of it. But then God showed me the reality of it, and it made me realize how much I needed to cope. And I didn't even know as a man I could cope, because I felt like growing up, this is what your reality is. You're a product of your environment. And if every man around you looks like you and he's moving like this and every situation is the same, you feeling like I have to mask myself by drugs, by women, by buying clothes. I was addicted to buying clothes just because I felt like this will make me feel more confident. This is my way of coping.
Yeah, shopaholic.
You know?
Now, I was talking to a trainer not too long ago, and they was talking about how, like, just the average person, I think in general, usually wants to cope by feeling like a little high, whatever it is. Whether it's the high from buying something, high from drinking, high from smoking, whatever it is, right? But then a lot of people too, like you find the people in the gym, they get high off of working out too.
Yes.
That's what he was mentioning too. It's like one of those things where it's like it creates a little thing in your mind that allows you to, feel better for the rest of the day, right? Whether it's in a healthy way or if it's in an unhealthy way. Right. You know what I mean? And I was curious, like, if we're all looking for that, if that's a natural basis, what everyone's looking in terms of trying to cope, right? Because some people cope in doing good deeds for other people. If they feel like they're a bad person, they'll help an old lady across the street just to help themselves.
That's
you know what I mean? That's wild.
That is wild.
No, that's definitely deep. Like, thinking like from a level of like doing things for other people, right? Thinking that, well, I get a little happiness if I make that person happy. Right. Yeah. But in actuality,
it doesn't work like that. Yeah. It doesn't work like
that. Ever has to do with people being able to see themselves in a different light? If you work a certain job, you see yourself as that job, right? Yeah. You might be just, let's say, like, so I know some housewives or house moms, they see themselves as just I'm a house mom or I'm a housewife.
Yes.
But they raising kids. They're doing all these different things, and they'll do volunteer jobs, right?
Yes.
But they don't look at any of those things because they're not getting paid for it. Or then you have a guy that like works a whole lot and all he sees himself as this particular person, but he don't see himself as a provider or supporter for his family or anything like that. Where he's missing the other parts of his life, and he's trying to cope with it in other ways. Then they distance themselves from family or whatever that they need to have in their life, you know, that they've been supporting, you know, with their actions.
Yeah. No, it's definitely like, I'm gonna be honest. I'm here freaking on 6-7 days away from work, and as soon as I got in the airport, I emailed my whole team like, hey, just because I'm gone, I'm still available and different things like that. But it's
create that space.
It's like, for me, it's like, I think and I think realizing it now while we're having this conversation, I don't decompress, right? So I'm always on 10, you know, whether whether it's, you know, trying to get, you know, this place set up or getting, you know, something done at work. It's like my mind never stops. But I also think that it's you know, if I'm being honest, right, it's also a thing of that it's because, like Jada said, I'm afraid to be vulnerable, not with myself. That's the easy part. Be vulnerable with God. So God can be like, Lance, like, this is what it is.
What it really is.
Because, you know, we think like, oh, if I'm be, you know, all into God, I gotta stop this, I gotta do this. But when you open up his word, he never said that, right? You know, it is more of a thing that he will start to, you will no longer have those desires, right? Of doing all those other things, but looking towards him, right? But it's a thing of like, for me, like, I just want to get to that point where I don't desire, right? Or is either I have the desire or have no desire. I don't want to deal with that point of like process, like trying to, because at the end of the day, it's convicting when you're trying to get to God, right? And then you sit down at a bar and have a drink, and that drink feels good, right?
But in the back of your mind, that he's saying that drink is not really the
in
thing.
the back of your mind, scriptures are reading. It's crazy. It's like, how am I putting this in my mouth?
Scripture, leave me alone.
And then I'm just trying to get more of them drinks. So scriptures can shut up.
Right.
It's wild.
You already know.
100%.
And you know what's so real about that? Like, when I was going through my old life and the way I was moving before, trying to cope in those ways, whether it be those, you know, whether it's women or drugs or whatever it was, I felt like I always had God ringing in the back of my head. You know this is not right. Like, you know this is not right. But you just keep ignoring it, and the more you ignoring it, it's like you're trying to shut it out. And then one day, it just all comes back at you, and he shows you your life, and you're like, oh my God, what was I doing? How did I even get here? You know what I'm saying? And that's the biggest thing, and that's what we realized. That was the realization for me that, okay, I need to settle down. I need to cope. I need to sit down.
Well, I think this was good. I think this is
Thanks for being a part of this discussion. We've talked about coping, not just something we do to survive, but as a way that can hold us back if we're not careful. Remember, there's strength in facing these things head on. If today's episode sparked anything in you, help us spread the message. Like, subscribe, share this video, and if you feel led to support what we do, we'd be honored to receive a donation from you. Just click the link in the description or through our Cash App or PayPal. Together, let's create a space for men to heal and move forward. And above all else, keep believing.